Welcome to 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kerby, and my guest today is Dr. Paul Offit. Thank you once again for being here, Dr. Paul Offit. You are very generous with your time, I must say.
My pleasure.
I do have an introduction for you, which I've changed slightly, so I'm going to read it. Dr. Paul Offit is a professor of pediatrics at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He is the recipient of many awards and honors and is a physician, scientist, co-inventor of Rototeq, a rotavirus vaccine that is estimated to save hundreds of lives a day. He has published more than 180 papers in medical and scientific journals and is the author of 11 books. Is that correct? 11 books?
Something like that.
Several of which are on vaccines and the history of vaccines. You are a tireless advocate for children, both in the books that you write and your willingness to take on the anti-vaccination movement, which has made you a controversial figure, at least for them. You are currently a member of Accelerating COVID-19 Technological Innovations and Vaccines, or ACTIV, which is a group put together by the head of the National Institute of Health, Dr. Francis Collins. ACTIV is comprised of industry representatives and representatives from the CDC, FDA, and academia. Your latest book is Overkill: When Modern Medicine Goes Too Far. Once again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you've made a lot of appearances, so I apologize if some of my questions are the same, but I don't think you can hear this information too much, to tell you the truth. A few weeks ago, Alex Azar said that they had possibly 100 vaccines. They narrowed down to 14, hoping to get to 4 or 5 for extensive testing. Can you update that information? And specifically, in your opinion, do you think that the early 2021 date of a vaccine, the assurance of that is correct or likely?
Yeah, I would say it's likely that we'll have a vaccine by early 2021, certainly by mid-2021. And I don't think it'll be one vaccine. I think we'll have more than one vaccine. I mean, the ones that have sort of risen to the top are the ones, frankly, that were the fastest to make. I mean, the good news about this virus is you know what you're interested in. You're interested in that protein that sits on the surface, the so-called spike protein. That's the protein that attaches the virus to cells. If you can prevent the virus from attaching to cells, you can prevent the virus from infecting cells. So if you can make an antibody response against that protein, you know you're good. And you know the gene that codes for that protein. So for these genetic approaches like messenger RNA or DNA or the so-called replication defective simian or human adenoviruses, you just plug the gene in and then you give the person this vector, whether it's mRNA or DNA or simian or human adenoviruses, and then your body makes that protein, makes that spike protein. Then your body makes an antibody response to that spike protein. So those are fast. Those are really fast. It's very easy to make them, very easy to scale them up. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're best. And I think there are a number of other approaches that are being considered. Serum Institute of India is looking at a live attenuated viral vaccine. You have China now has several inactivated vaccines that are currently being tested, already being tested in phase 3. And that may be the last best vaccine, is the inactivated viral vaccine, for which we actually have platforms. The sort of vaccines that I mentioned, mRNA, or you know, the simian or replication defective human adenovirus, there's no platform for that. We don't have a commercial vaccine for any of those. So here you're meeting a novel virus, this bat coronavirus, with vaccine strategies that have never been used to make a vaccine before, right? What could possibly go wrong? I'm sure that there's a lot we have to learn in our future here.
You just mentioned the mRNA vaccine, and I know Moderna's, that's their big deal, and they're up here in the Boston area. A couple, 3-4 weeks ago, they had a press release that they had done testing in, I think, 6 subjects, and they'd gotten the same neutralizing activity that was found in natural immunity. It was a press release, not data-driven. Is it data-driven now? Have you seen some data on that?
No, it was a press release that showed that they had, what they'd done is they'd taken 45 people in Washington State. They divided them into 3 groups of 15 each. They received sort of a low, middle, or high dose of this messenger RNA. What they found that in the first 2 groups, not the highest dose group, but the lowest, low and middle dose groups, that of those 30 patients, 8 of them had a neutralizing antibody response, meaning that the antibodies neutralized the ability of virus to infect cells. at a level that was seen after natural infection. But see, some people are naturally infected and don't develop any neutralizing antibodies, so it's hard to know what it means when they say at the same level as natural infection. It would have been nice to have seen those numbers. Also, what happened to the other 22 patients? I mean, in theory, that was 8 of 30 patients. What happened to the other 22? This is why it's really hard now to sort of do this science by press release. It would be much better if they submitted their data to a peer-reviewed journal, and we all got to look at all the data so we could see what they really are talking about.
So that was weeks ago. They still haven't released the data?
Not that they have. I've seen a preprint, but all those data were their mouse data, so I haven't seen those human data yet. No.
All right. Because we're working so fast, I'm sorry to use that, because the science is going so fast, can you explain what a live challenge is? And do you think it's going to be necessary or ethical in this situation? Because I know there are volunteers for it.
I think it's ethical. I mean, I think Art Kaplan, who's an ethicist now at NYU Langone, has weighed in on this as being ethical. I mean, people know what I think they're volunteering for. You know, it is tricky because you're giving somebody a virus that is potentially fatal, and you don't have a rescue drug. I mean, remdesivir, the antiviral drug that's being used now, certainly shortens the duration of illness, but there's no evidence that it saved lives. So it is tricky. The problem, I don't think it's going to be used. I don't think we're going to have to use it. We're already moving into phase 3 trials. There's outbreaks in this country. There's outbreaks in this world. I don't think it would be hard to do these trials where your placebo group has enough disease in it that you can make a comment about effectiveness. Also, the challenge studies are not quite as easy as you think. I mean, you have to make sure that you mimic the natural infection as close as possible. So you have to give the same dose that one would normally be exposed to in a natural situation. Also, when you're growing the virus up in the laboratory, before you give it to people, you have to make sure it's the same virus that's circulating. And this is a single-stranded RNA virus, so it mutates a little bit. It's not easy. The FDA also has a pretty high bar for doing these kinds of studies. So you have to prove that you're not giving too much virus or too little virus. And so you have to do this kind of dose ranging studies. It's not easy. I think in many ways it's going to be easier just to, in the natural world, get out there. I mean, there's outbreaks in Arizona, outbreaks in Texas, outbreaks in North Carolina, outbreaks in Southern California. I mean, you should be able to do trials now where you have a lot of natural infection out there.
You sit on the FDA Vaccine Advisory Committee. The phase 3 trials are going ahead. Where is the Vaccine Advisory Committee in all of this? And if this comes under an emergency use authorization, what are the parameters for that?
I don't think the FDA so-called VRBPAC committee, Vaccine-Related Biological Product Approval Committee, or Vaccine Advisory Committee, more easily known as, I don't think we're going to be involved in this at all. I think this is all going to be I don't think these are going to be licensed vaccines. I think these are going to be approved vaccines through the emergency use authorization, and the FDA is going to be involved, but in a lighter way than they would be if they were actually licensing these products. The thing that worries me, and I actually wrote with Zeke Emanuel an op-ed piece in the New York Times a couple weeks ago now, is the October surprise. In other words, that this is an election year. You may have read about that, but so November 3rd is election day, and when you hear Trump just the other day said, we're going to have some really good news on the vaccine and really soon, I just fear that what he's going to do is sort of reach his hand into the warp speed bucket, say, look, I mean, we have, thousands of people have gotten these products safely. They induce a great immune response, and, let's get it out there and save American lives. And you could be fooled by that because for many vaccines, there's not a clear immune correlate for protection. And so just because you have a good immune response doesn't necessarily mean that it's effective. The only way you can know whether it's effective is do a safety and efficacy trial. And what we've recommended at the NIH ACTIV group is 20,000 vaccinees, 10,000 placebo recipients, and then I think, and only then, are you really going to know what you need to know. We typically have vaccine programs that last 15 to 20 years. This is a 1.5 year program, but the one thing you can't skip is that phase 3 trial. That's the pudding. That's the proof is in the pudding. That's the pudding. You have to do that trial.
Well, so what are the parameters with the EUA? I mean, is that just the president says, gung ho, let's go? I mean, is it a one-person decision?
Well, ultimately, it's the FDA's decision. So ultimately, it's Stephen Hahn's decision as
Okay.
FDA. I mean, no, Donald Trump can't say, this is the vaccine that we want that's getting out there. He can't do that. He has to get permission from the FDA under EUA. But I don't like what happened with hydroxychloroquine. I think if that was a warning shot, it was a bad one, which is, you had basically the FDA saying that they would approve the use of that drug in people who were infected with this virus when there wasn't a bit of evidence that it worked. There wasn't any controlled trials. And when the controlled trials came out, we found out it didn't work. We found out it also was unsafe in 10% of people because it caused cardiac toxicities. I don't think I'm choosing to believe that the system will work here, that Dr. Fauci and others will not let us release this vaccine unless it's been subjected to phase 3 trials. I guess I just feel better if I heard Stephen Hahn say exactly that. I mean, you had Francis Collins, head of NIH, get on national TV recently and said, this is what we want. We want a phase 3 trial like we always have been doing for the last 70 years, where we have about 20,000 vaccinees, 10,000 placebo. Now, you may find out that you don't need that many people, that you have a high enough attack rate in your placebo group that even earlier than you do those 30,000 participants, that you have something that's safe and effective. Great, that's fine. But that's the only way you can prove it. And Stephen Hahn is the key guy here. He's the guy who has to approve it through EUA.
You mentioned Dr. Anthony Fauci just a second ago, and he has stated that the U.S. will need to commit to manufacturing millions of doses before the vaccine is proven, just so we're ready to go. What do you before safety and efficacy are shown? What do you think about that? Is that's really necessary, just in case there's one that hits?
Or many that hit, or several that hit. I think it's fine. I mean, this is Warp Speed 2. I mean, the Warp Speed 1 was the polio vaccine in 1955. When Jonas Salk tested his vaccine in 700 children in the Pittsburgh area, he found that the vaccine was safe, at least in 700 children, and that it induced an excellent immune response. And so he then subjected that vaccine to a phase 3 trial, which was 420,000 children got the vaccine, 200,000 got placebo. That was a huge study. It took a year to do. But during that year, 5 companies made the vaccine as if it was going to be safe and as if it was going to be effective. So that when it was found to be safe and effective in April of 1955, that vaccine then rolled out into the arms of children within a day or two. That's what they're doing here. What worries me about this is that is a large and tempting pool of vaccine where you can say, look, we've got millions of doses. Let's put it out there now, even though we haven't done a phase 3 trial.
I've read the Cutter incident, one of your first books, or maybe it was the first book. And
first book, yeah.
And I'm not saying this is the case for Cutter Labs. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but a manufacturer, they can follow the best known science at the time and still have problems. So one thing that stood out to me in the book was the advent of liability without fault for manufacturers. They were liable, but at no fault. So in these current times with the rush to get the vaccine, do you think manufacturers will need some kind of indemnity from the U.S. government or a assurance of that?
That's a great question. I mean, by liability without fault, what used to be true before 1955 is that if you had a product, in this case a vaccine, that was licensed by the Food and Drug Administration, then you were protected from liability. That if you found out that something was problematic when was given to millions of people or tens of millions of people, that was okay because you didn't know that beforehand because you tested it in, say, thousands or tens of thousands of people. This was the birth of liability without fault, meaning that you didn't know that it was going to be a problem, but it ended up being a problem. It's a good question. I mean, the government really is largely paying for this vaccine. I mean, they're paying for the manufacture of the vaccine. And we do have the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. If this vaccine is recommended for people in this country, which it will be, does that mean then that it falls under the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which means that, that there is at least that protection, that you would have to go through that program first before you could take it to civil court. And for the most part, that program has protected pharmaceutical companies from frivolous litigation. So I think I can't imagine it wouldn't be covered by the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, again, which is to say it's based on a federal excise tax that's put on every dose of vaccine. And so there's roughly $3 billion in that program to compensate people who really are hurt by vaccines.
You mentioned the manufacturer of the vaccine. How many manufacturers are there in the U.S.? Because there's been a flight out of the U.S. due to this liability without fault. Is that correct? I mean, there used to be dozens of manufacturers, and now how many are there? And will it be possible to scale up very quickly?
Well, now I mean, there's four companies that typically make vaccines for American children, but you're now seeing other companies getting into the game, like Johnson & Johnson, for example, is not a typical vaccine maker. AstraZeneca is not a big vaccine maker. They're sort of in the game now. And, worldwide, there's more than 70 companies that are interested in this vaccine. And I think if, for example, China's vaccine, which is an inactivated vaccine, worked well, it's not hard to reproduce that technology of taking a virus, growing it up, and inactivating it with a chemical.
You've been on before, and I don't mean to put you on the spot too much here, but early on in this, you were kind of confident we wouldn't see more than 10,000 deaths, and then we got to 30. You didn't see that doubling. We're in the mid 120s now, and what happened with the information that you had at the time to make the outcome different? I mean, was it slow shutdowns, no nationally consistent policy?
Maybe the answer is you shouldn't ask me, since I'm so consistently wrong about this. But what I would say is that what fooled me in this were a couple things. I kept looking at what other countries were doing, but the other countries that I was looking at were, China, South Korea, Singapore, Japan, and they did so much better with this than we did. I mean, they did a lot of early testing. They sort of restricted immigration into their country from countries like China where this was a problem, and so they got on top of this so much more quickly. So what I did was I thought, okay, here's the size of their country, here's the size of our country. We'll just extrapolate those two, and we shouldn't reach the kind of levels we've reached now. But as it turns out, we are one of the worst countries in the world. We have 4% of the world's population and 25% of deaths from this virus. So we've just done worse than pretty much any other country. I didn't predict that was going to happen.
All right, I don't want you to make a prediction here, but let me throw something out. It's June 24th or 5th right now, and we're getting through the summer. We're going to go into the fall. Every year there's, tens of millions of flu infections, hundreds of thousands of hospitalization, again, tens of thousands of deaths. Are we looking at the perfect storm here if we don't get a vaccine for this? I mean, it's not going to come by the fall, so what's going to happen, I guess?
Right. So I mean, last year's flu epidemic, which you can count on every year, every year we will have an influenza epidemic. Last year there were upwards of 50 million cases of influenza in this country. There were about 700,000 hospitalizations and as many as 60,000 deaths from influenza. Now, that all happened pretty much before we started to see deaths from COVID-19, which really didn't start till the beginning of March. So those two things were sequential, not concomitant. If they're concomitant this year, and there's every reason to believe they will be, then imagine how overwhelmed the healthcare system will be. We need a vaccine. I mean, a vaccine is the only way we are going to effectively stop this virus, I think, from spreading. And if you assume that the so-called reproducibility index, which is to say the number of people you'll infect during a day, assuming everybody you come in contact with is susceptible, the reproducibility index of this virus is around 2. Knowing that, and let's assume that the vaccine that we have coming up is 70% effective at preventing moderate to severe disease, then you would need to have about 70% of the population to be immunized in order to effectively stop spread. And it's going to be a while for that to happen.
So if the vaccine is early 2021, we're going to go through a flu season, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think it could be a few years. I mean, look at polio. I mean, the polio vaccine came out in 1955. This was a vaccine that was highly desired, much as the COVID-19 vaccine is highly desired. So how many cases of paralysis did we have in 1955? 29,000. The following year was 15,000 cases of paralysis. The following year was 5,000 cases of paralysis. We didn't get to less than 1,000 cases of paralysis for 7 years, and that was with a highly, highly effective vaccine. I mean, more than 90% effective. It's going to be more effective than the vaccine we're going to be making here. So I just think that if this virus continues to act the way it's been acting, we're going to be living with this for a while.
Can you speak a little bit about the mortality rate? And I'm only doing simple math, so you'll correct me on this because I know I'm way off. But if we're looking at about 3.5 million cases in the United States and 122,000 deaths, the simple math is a 5% mortality rate. So what's happened to the zero prevalence testing in the general population? I know that NIH was doing some, Stanford was doing some, I think Kaiser had some that they were doing. What's the actual prevalence in the population? Are we still looking at 10 to 20 times the reported rate? No clue yet?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, our testing has been sporadic and haphazard. I know that now with most recent testing, a larger percentage of people who are being tested are positive. So that tells you that we just have not gotten on top of this. I mean, and yesterday we had more cases in this country than we've ever had before with this pandemic. We beat our previous high from 2 months ago. I mean, we're just not getting on top of this. I mean, Arizona, Southern California, Texas, North Carolina are all in the midst of massive outbreaks. And we just, it's not that the testing doesn't bother me as much. Forget the testing. We're never going to get the testing. I've said that before in your program. I'll continue to say it. We keep wanting more testing. It's not happening. Wear masks. I mean, just do that. It's a simple hygienic measure. It's a respiratory virus. Wear masks. I mean, you watch Donald Trump at that Arizona, thing where he's got 3,000 people in a limited space, and he's not wearing masks, and nobody's wearing masks. And I mean, you're just asking for trouble. I don't get it. I really don't get it.
70 or 80% of people that are infected, they have either mild or no symptoms, but they have to be considered. So everybody is considered a carrier. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so it's the original data out of China, and it's true, about 80% of people who are infected with this virus are either asymptomatically infected or mildly symptomatically infected, but they can still shed virus. So that's what makes this so heinous, and so much worse than SARS or MERS, the first two novel coronaviruses, where that wasn't true. Everybody who was sick either had moderate to severe disease, so it was much easier to put a moat around them because it was very easy to recognize them. Now, anybody you see on the street, you think, is carrying a virus that could potentially kill you. So that's what makes for this so dramatic fear about this virus, because everybody is at risk, and it's frightening.
Any signs of mutation that you've seen? Getting better, getting worse?
Yeah, so it's a single-stranded RNA virus, so it'll mutate, just as all single-stranded RNA viruses do, like measles or mumps or rubella. It's most like rubella because it's a so-called messenger RNA, single-stranded RNA virus. I only consider something to be having mutated if it results in a functional change, meaning that it makes the virus either more severe or less severe, or that it causes it to avoid the vaccine. I don't see any evidence for that.
Okay, great. Good news there. All right, I know you're rushed for time today, but let me ask one final question. This is a so-called 100-year event, and I guess this is either a pessimistic or an optimistic statement, but as pandemics and epidemics plagues go, it's kind of a mild one. We're not looking at an R0 in the teens. We're not looking at a 60% mortality rate. People devote their lives to studying such events and trying to get the government prepared for them. So what kind of gaps has this shown in our system, or areas for improvement that could be made? Because although this is a 100-year event, there are worse things.
I mean, hopefully we've learned a lesson in theory that we should have learned a while ago. I mean, when the H5N1 bird flu sort of raised its head in Southeast Asia in 2005, the administration put in place a pandemic preparedness program where we would be able to make, personal protective equipment quickly. We'd be able to sort of commandeer companies to make vaccines quickly. That was all in place. Unfortunately, that was kind of taken apart by the current administration, and now we're trying to sort of catch the tail of this virus. I mean, I'd like to think we now realize that this is the third novel coronavirus to come out of Southeast Asia, and it won't be the last, and that we need to be ready for these things when they happen and be much smarter about it. Our current administration, just their current strategy is to ignore it and hope it goes away, to keep pretending it's not there. I just think we couldn't be stupider about this.
All right. I don't know if that was optimistic or pessimistic. So do you have some final words you'd like to leave me with?
Yes, there will be a vaccine. I think there will be more than one vaccine. I would be surprised if we didn't have something by the middle of next year. It's great that we're making a lot of millions of doses now. And I think that if we can probably get to 60 or 70% immunization rate in this country, we can stop the spread of this virus. It may take a couple of years to do that, but I'm optimistic that we can stop the spread of this virus. And the vaccine is the best and frankly only way to do it.
All right. Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Offit. I greatly appreciate your time today. I want to have you back because I want to talk about Overkill. It's a great book. Okay. So maybe we can get off COVID-19 sometime and talk about Overkill.
I thought you were only allowed to talk about COVID-19. I mean, this book came out in April. It's like no one talks about it because we can only talk about this virus, but I'm happy to come back.
I have several questions. I just want to compile them in a logical order. So, okay. Dr. Offit, thank you for being here on 502 Conversations. I'm Brian Kerby. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.